Who told you witchcraft is bad? Who taught you witchcraft is bad? Is witchcraft bad, or were you told that it is bad? The way we look at ourselves is in the lens of someone else. Basically, for 200 to 400 years of colonialism and slave trade, our story has been diluted time and time again. You know, I always tell people that Batshezi are a myth. Batshezi were soldiers from the Roman Empire.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, where we talk about anything and everything. And today, why we started this show was to have conversations about things that really matter. So today with me, I have Brenda Lynn.
Hello.
Self-professed storyteller. And today, we are talking about storytelling in the African and Ugandan context. So tell me, what's the African story in your opinion, Brenda?
First of all, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for hosting me, Regan. My name is Brenda Lynn Kirungi. I'm a storyteller. And a lot of times when I say I'm a storyteller, people want to know, what does that mean? Yeah. I think storytelling is an art. Yeah. It can be done in many ways, although I really love the traditional way of storytelling, which was oral. Yeah. For African storytelling, the most used tool was oral storytelling. Yeah. Whereas there's written and there's audio visual and all these things, oral was like the best way to pass on information and knowledge to young people. And you've heard of so many people say Africans don't like to read, Africans don't like to write, they don't write down their things. Yeah. And it's so easy for us to judge Africans based on the standard that the Western world has come with. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I always tell people, no, it's not that we don't like to read or write. We have a process. It's oral storytelling. We tell stories orally.
In a modern context, orally, because right now, let's say there is visual media, there are radio stations. Do you feel that telling the African story, how it's supposed to be told? Or it's, I don't know, do you think that telling the story, how it's supposed to be told, or it's someone else's narrative? It could be the media houses. Do you think we're telling the story the way it's supposed to be told, the way it's supposed to be relayed to the masses?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge for the African storyteller has been Western media influence. Yeah. Because for us, our stories were told orally, passed on from one generation to another. They were telling stories of culture, and a lot of times we used music and dance to tell these stories. That's why you see from the dances that we have, the cultural dances, you would know what, say, social activity people did, what economic activity. When you look at the dances from Ankole, you'd know that these people were farmers because of imitating the horns and the process of hunting and all that. When you look at, say, it's like every dance, every song had a story to tell. That's still is, not was, it was, but still is the African way to tell stories. Now, the challenge here has been that there has been Western media influence because we have Hollywood, which has taken the world by storm, and we have all those things now. For Africans to want to tell their story to the world, for so many years, they had to blend into the narrative of the Western media. They had to blend into what Hollywood can accept. For some reason, and this is a mental issue, for some reason, it's like we needed validation from the colonial master.
Or from how they do things.
How they do things, and therefore look at us, we can do what you do, accept us,
Sorry to
love
cut you
us.
short. So what you've been trying to say, what I've actually got to understand right now, we are always telling stories.
We're always telling stories. We tell stories from the way we dress. We say, I'm putting on that koi, and you'll just know that person is from Uganda. Sure. For so many people, the issue of telling the African story is just one of those things, conversational starters. Yeah. It's not like they really care. Mm-hmm. People don't really care, but they love the idea of saying, oh, let us tell the African story. African stories are not being told. African story is this. And a lot of times they speak from ignorance. Yeah. Now, I used to be that person, and one time, I was so judgmental, I'd say, look at the kind of work, the quality of work that we have. And until I decided, no, I need to find out who is telling these stories? Who is doing the films from Uganda? Who is doing this and that? And when I started to research,
there are actually people out there.
A lot of people are putting in work, passion, love into telling the African story. And you know, the most unfortunate bit is we do not support those people. We are so good at saying no one is telling the African story, no one is doing this, but we are not good at supporting the people who are actually doing it. For instance, if you ask where do these people go, Ndere Center has programs running all through the week, except for the whole COVID situation. But before, any day of the week you'd go to Ndere, there was a program, there was a story being told from a certain part of Uganda. There are so many young people who are telling these stories through dance, through drama, through writing, very many, but we do not take time to do what? To get to know them. If you go to National Theatre, they have these Ugandan film screenings they do.
Playwrights always have plays.
Playwrights, there's always information. The information is there, but the truth is we're not interested. We like to pretend that to be interested in the African story, but the fact of the matter is that we are not. Would rather sit on a series from Hollywood and complete 5 seasons down than look out for the African story.
There is this Ugandan, every time he puts on Ugandan content, he sees something, there is something he sees that probably he hates about Uganda. So how do we tackle that? To know that probably this person who wrote this movie, for example, there is a critic, a movie critic, in one of the big papers in this country, who criticized Queen of Katwe. Queen of Katwe was a movie about a chess prodigy who grew up in the slums. So he was criticizing it because it was showing the slums, saying, oh, there's a way we're depicting Uganda. But so the Ugandans who don't want to see this, you know, poverty-stricken Uganda, but we forget that that's the story of most Ugandans. So when Hollywood came to Uganda and told our story the way it actually is, some people criticize it. They're like, yo, there are better things in Uganda, there are better stories to tell. But it's the reality. So the Ugandan will spend, 5 hours on Netflix watching a movie that glorifies, how Europe is. So what is it that is that about us Ugandans? Is it because we are familiar with, we don't want to see something we're familiar with? Or so how do we tackle that narrative to know that these are our own stories, this is how they are?
Okay, thank you for that question, Regan. First of all, I think the biggest issue that we are facing, and not just in Uganda but worldwide, is an identity crisis. There are a lot of issues that come from not knowing who you are and not having a strong foundation in your identity as a country, as an African continent. We have that issue. Why? Because right from the start, while we knew our story, some other people came and told us that story that is evil, it's wrong, it's not worthy of our approval. And so they started to teach us their story. They taught us their new religions. They're basically for 200 to 400 years of colonialism and slave trade and all the things, brainwashing. Our story has been diluted time and time again, and this has also affected the way Africans look at themselves. The way we look at ourselves is in the lens of someone else. Now, what does that mean? Whereas it's very subtle, it actually again translates into the same challenge that we see when we look at the work being produced by these people and the work we produce for ourselves. We are always seeing, judging our work based on the standards of these other people. It's a whole esteem issue,
Because I'll go back to Nigerians. When Nigerians were popping up, the film industry, there would be very many stories about witchcraft. But then the people who are criticizing them were Africans. And we all know like back there what's happening. It's probably what's happening. So we are quick to dismiss, don't do witchcraft stories. So,
and I mean that also comes back to who told you witchcraft is bad? Who told you witchcraft is bad? That's what maybe that's something you should ponder about. That's a story for another episode. Is witchcraft bad, or were you told that it is bad?
What do you think is the future of the African story with our own narrative? Because as we all know, as Africans, the things that might appear taboo to even us, because as you've said, we've been brainwashed. There is Christianity that entered the whole foreign religion. So how do we tell, like going forward, how do you think we should tell our African story without being afraid of anything, of anyone?
Yeah, I think the first thing is if we can go back to being truly authentic and understanding what does it mean to be an authentic African.
Sure.
And what does that also imply when it comes to my story? The story that you know of who you are. I like, there's a friend I was having a conversation with and they said, these stories that we tell, what if our entire lives are all about stories? Because you have ancestors, and by ancestors I mean grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, that people that you didn't even see from whom you are from. You're here because of them, but all you have is stories of them, and these stories that you hear of those people are also being told to you by other people, by foreigners, and they're telling you how to treat them, and a lot of times our African story is diluted by the fact that African culture was extremely spiritual. We were I think Africans were the most spiritual people, and quote me, not religious, spiritual. Yes.
Because we have names for deities before they came up with
before
God,
we have all these things.
Each and every tribe in
we
Uganda
had our cultures
were
rotating completely around spirituality, and that is what made the story more mysterious, more interesting. But now people are afraid. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of spirituality because someone told them that if you go back into understanding African culture and spirituality, then you're practicing witchcraft, which is the issue of witchcraft we're talking about. Then you're evil, then you're a bad person. But now this is the way, the truth and the light. This is the only way to go.
So there's always this story that has always fascinated me, which I have a feeling is the best story that Uganda has to offer to us ourselves, the Bachwezi. When you hear about their stories, when you hear about the Bachwezi, you know, the magical stuff they used to do.
I tell people Bachwezi are a myth and they don't understand because someone has come and given you this whole story.
But myths always give the best stories,
They
right?
do. But okay, maybe I should explain the Bachwezi issue.
Please do.
Bachwezi were soldiers from the Roman Empire who, when they lost the war, but go and do research. Me, I do my own research.
That's your own story.
It's quoted. It's actually researched. There are books by L.T. Rubongoya. My grandfather has written about it. There's a John Ruganda has written about it. Very many people, if you go to the library at Makerere School of Arts, there's information on language and culture and
what
history.
You're trying to say, were Bachwezi
when
white
Bachwezi
people?
came, because we were very dark-skinned melanin people, we had never seen someone as light, a white person in our lives as Africans. So when these people came, the Roman soldiers who had lost the war in Ethiopia, you know, they lost the war in Ethiopia, and then they came and settled into Western Uganda. So when they came, remember they were more, of course, experienced soldiers. They had, you know, sharp items. They had all these modern kind of tools that we didn't have. And so when people saw them, they'd never seen anything like that. And remember, every time something is mysterious, it's regarded as, you know,
attached myth to
attached myth to it. So they say those people are gods, demigods. Actually, they were called demigods. They call them demigods even from the accents, even from the way they did their things. They were better fighters. They were better because, you see, Africans had rudimental tools, and then these guys come with, say, better tools than that had. So it was so easy to call them demigods. And so they were treated that way. And so the mystery continued and the myth continued. Up to now, we think Bachwezi were demigods.
You see the importance of the African story? Now I'm getting a different story of the Bachwezi.
Which is not out there.
Which is not out
there. Sometimes you'd ask yourself, so why should we tell, you know, these other stories? To what end? Do you ever ask yourself, to what end should we know the original story or the authenticity? Honestly, sometimes it's easier to leave things the way they are. If people know what they know, it's okay. And other times, for the sake of a good story, you go there.
So there's this question I've always asked myself. What if our ancestors wrote down this stuff? How many stories do you think we'd be having by now? Of
course, that's true. So you know how there's pros and cons to everything. Honestly, I've also had this conversation before that we missed out on a lot of things because our ancestors didn't get time to document them, unlike other people's stories. But the advantage to that. Did you ever think about the advantages of that?
Not really.
I love our ancestors. Very brilliant people. I love them. Now, one of the things that, because African storytelling and culture was also around spirituality. Spirituality is introspective. You look within for answers, not on the outside. Whereas the written documentation of stories enables you to look in the outside to look for answers. Africans enabled us to look within. Now, in the process of oral storytelling, there are so many advantages to that. One, you train your memory. Because if you notice, our parents remember everything, unlike us who are dependent on Google. Our parents will tell you, in this year, this is what happened. I remember when I did this. But now for us, because we are so dependent on Google and recording, our memory is dying. Very good memory. Two, it's also to respect energy. But energy is a whole big topic. We're not postponing it, but African storytelling, oral storytelling enabled you to tap into your spiritual gifts and energies.
Something that has really caught my mind when you said it's introspective. So like to channel yourself to go and know your ancestors' story.
And you could,
how do you channel that?
How do that without...
if it's, as you said, it's all about energy. How do you channel that without, I don't know, through meditation?
And a lot of people would want to know the answer to that question. They want to know, okay, if that's the way, how do I do it? First, make your intention clear. What do you want to know? Once the intention is clear, then the next question will be, how do I get there? And because it's introspective, the ancestors, the guides, they will tell you.
Wow. That's really eye-opening. Guys, thank you for watching. It's been Ashawa Regan, your host, with Brenda Lynn, who came with a lot of fire to the show. I have a feeling we all have something to learn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chisel Hub, and click on that bell button so that you can always get notifications when we upload a video. Thank you very much.